Good afternoon. It's wonderful seeing so many book lovers in the house, and really excited to introduce an American treasure who's going to keep a wonderful conversation going. Before we start, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Tycely Williams, the president of the Junior League of Washington. We represent the volunteer force that over the last 16 years has helped the book festival with book lines. So we are delighted to be with you today. Also like to thank the Library of Congress for all of their work, as well as the National Endowment for the Arts for sponsoring our time together. I'd like to introduce James McBride, who is a beloved American writer and musician. Many of you know him as the recipient of the 2013 National Book Award for Fiction for his novel, The Good Lord Bird. He is currently a distinguished, yes, snap, snap. He's currently a distinguished writer in residence at New York University. He's a graduate of Oberlin College, father, yay, Oberlin in the house, all right, and father to 3 children. Let's warmly welcome our distinguished artist for the time being, Mr. McBride. We'd love to hear more about Five-Carat Soul and all that you've got. And as he's coming, he will speak for 25 minutes, and we will open it up to Q&A for the remaining 20. Enjoy. Thanks.
Well, you like me. You really like me. Thank you so much. So nice to see so many nice people here today. I really feel touched and honored. I forgot I was chewing gum. My mother told me when I was little that if you chew gum and swallow it, your rear end will close up. So I've always been cognizant. I've never. But my brother said, "What happens when you blow a bubble?" That's too much information. Anyway, I'm going to talk today about my latest book. And I know, when you go see someone talk, and you know, like Willie Nelson used to say, if they ask me to sing that song to all girls I've loved before, I'm going to kill somebody. But that's what they wanted to hear him sing. So I know a lot of you want to hear me talk about Color of Water and Good Lord Bird, which I'll do after I finish hawking this first. But I won't shamelessly hawk it. I'll just give you a brief synopsis of it and then share some ideas with you about some of the other books, the other 2 books that you might be interested in. And then I'll be happy to entertain any questions that you might have or conversation that you want to offer. I'm delighted to see so many of you here, and I'm cognizant that this is the year that Barbara Bush died. And Barbara Bush and Laura Bush have a lot to do with why we're here. They were big book lovers, and Michelle Obama. They were huge book lovers. But I know Laura Bush was really a big reason why the National Book Festival became what it is. And it doesn't take a lot to acknowledge someone, just to say thank you or to say they did something good. It really doesn't take a whole lot to do that. It just all you have to do is say it and feel it, and you feel better, So we buried Aretha Franklin yesterday, I guess, and Senator McCain today or tomorrow, whenever that happens. And we're a little bit smaller because of it, but we're a lot larger because of what they are and what they'll always be and always represent. And that's I feel like I'm talking to Congress. I'm like, okay, now, applause. I'm going to shake everyone's hand. All right, so my latest book is called Five-Carat Soul. It's a book of short stories. And some of these stories happened long ago. Some of them I wrote when I was in my 20s, and some of them I wrote recently. The most pertinent one to where we are is a story called Mr. P and the Wind. And I wrote this when I was a reporter at the Washington Post. I worked in the style section here at the Post, and that's when Ben Bradley ran the newspaper. And so I had the pleasure of working with some really talented people. And by the way, I'm very proud of what the Post has become in the last 3 or 4 years. It's really, really just become a fantastic organization. Of course, it wasn't any good when I was there, but that's not true. No, it was always a high standard of journalistic excellence, but now even greater. It's even more important that you subscribe to the paper. And if you have to decide between buying one of my books and subscribing to the paper, decide between another book and make sure. All right. So when I was here in Washington D.C., my brother's sons were 9 and 8 and 9 or something like that, respectively, and I took them to the National Zoo. They wanted to see some animals, so we went to the National Zoo here in Washington D.C. and I saw. That was the last zoo I ever visited because it was just really, it's painful to see these magnificent creatures. I don't need to tell you the rest. It just was, I didn't like it. So I wrote a short story about it. It became a novella, and I wrote the whole thing when I was here in Washington, D.C. And I'll read you the beginning of it. And it's called Mr. P and the Wind. It's essentially, this is a story about a lion who lives in a zoo in Washington, D.C., in a world where animals can talk to each other through the mind. And so this is how the story begins. I am a lion. I live in a zoo, but I was once a free lion and never forgot it. Many years ago, before I was captured and brung here, I knowed a lion who ate a man. His name was Box. I don't know how Box came to that name, for lions got their own names for their own purpose, and that name was a puzzlement to me. Box is a human name, you see, and it stands to reason maybe a human gives him that name. However it happened, or whether Box got a reason for telling it or not telling it, it ain't my business to know. For most lions know that man things often ain't got no purpose. And no creature of the jungle is going to sniff around something that ain't purposeful, especially something big as a name. For lions got their own names that's particular to them, like Monkey Tricked Him, or His Wife Don't Visit, or Orange Head, or Feet Smell Funny, or Don't Trust Her 'Cause She's a Son, or names like that. For example, humans call me Hal, but my real name is Get Along, Go Along. I never knew Box's real name, by the way. I was never stupid enough to ask about it neither, for Box was what you call a plain old dry, long soul lion. He was a hard lion, set in his ways. He didn't take no shit off nobody. Now, Box was hard set in his ways. He couldn't adjust to nothing. He didn't like fancy things, no springboks, rhinos, ostrich, monkey, and all that kind of jazz for him. Just straight out blood and guts. Zebra, snake, zebra, whatever you could get. He was what you call old country. He didn't slaughter a lot, but what he did slaughter, he did eat. Most of what he ate was bigger creatures, so the smaller, scarcer ones could grow big enough for bigger eating later. He didn't waste nothing, including time. So when he seen me walk around one day when I was but a little cub, he said, "Sit here a minute, I got something to tell you." I sat down to listen, for Box wasn't nobody to ignore. Now, I've heard many a story told to me when I was a cub running free back yonder in the plains of Africa. And a bunch of them stories was lies, for animals ain't no different than man that way. The story starts out one day, and 5 days later, it grows tree branches and leaves, and before you know it, it's the size of a mountain with caves and rocks, and you can't see the bottom of the thing while standing on top of it. But Box told me this story himself, and Box wasn't the type to lie. And this is what Box told me. He was coming through the jungle one day, and a hunter surprised him, got the drop on him. Box walked right past him, never smelled him or sensed him, nothing. The man jumped out of a bush from behind Box, holding a spear with dead lion scent all over it. He had Box dead to rights. He had old Box cold. Wasn't nothing Box could do. Box knew his big head was going to hang from the wall of that man's lair for the rest of the time, while the man apologized to Box and all his relatives for taking his life and so forth. For that's how the old-time hunters did it. They put you to the big sleep and thank your relatives afterwards by praying and so forth, so your souls can live together for the rest of time while he uses your claws as plates for his smoking sticks and so forth. There wasn't nothing Box could do, so he said to himself, "It is a good day to die," and turned on the man and waited to sleep. But this man knew too much. Instead of throwing his spear, when Box turned on him, the man spoke to Box in thought speak. And you know what he said? He said this: "I know it ain't your 24th hour." Well, that threw old Box. I don't know what threw old Box more, man talking in thought speak, which is how animals speak, or man speaking about the 24th hour. Both had never happened to Box before, but man spouting off about that 24th hour put the whole thing in a different light. See, a lion won't sleep but 1 hour a day. The other 23 hours, we mostly sleep or look for fun or sex. That's our game. Lions is higher orders, which is all animals call ourselves. It's mostly a pleasure trip being a higher order, except 1 or 2 rules you got to stick to. Box's old-fashioned soul that he was just floored by that whole business. He just didn't know what to do. First, hearing man throw thought speak around like that, then him going on about the 24th hour. Box got chicken-hearted, so he said, "Excuse me?" "You heard me," the man said in clear thought speak. "I know this ain't your 24th hour. You know how I know? I've been tracking you, Box. You're still in your 23 hours of wandering around, sleeping, looking for water and fun and girls, all that. So I won't kill you. For I don't want your head now. I want your head in the 24th hour when you are hunting. For I am a great chief myself, and I'm looking for something mighty like me. So I'm going to let you live. I'm even going to suggest a few things for you to do in your free 23 hours, Box. For I have traveled many places, and I knows many things, and I can help you." Then he patted Box on the shoulder and turned him away. That's when Box jumped him. He knocked the man down, grabbed the man's spear with his mouth, and stuck the tooth end down into the earth so the stick stood up like a pole. Then he snatched him up in his mouth and whipped the man across the stick, back and forth, beating the man with his own stick, beating the stick with the man. And when he was done, he threw him down and tore him up, ripped him up, ran a paw across the man's face and killed him dead. Then he ate him, or a good part of him, and slept a good 2 days without waking up. Many a day I've thought about Box while sitting in this cage, pacing back and forth, night and day, year in and year out, thinking about it. That hunter did no harm to old Box. The man had him cold and didn't kill him. He even offered to school Box on how to live good in his free time. Still, old Box killed him. You know why? He was insulted, see? If man had walked off and said nothing, Box would have walked on into the jungle and gone about his business. But man had to turn around and tell a higher order, a grown lion, what was in his head. Box didn't want that man defining him and telling him who he was and what all his plans was and what Box was supposed to do with his free 23 hours and how man knew everything Box was supposed to do in his free 23 hours. That was Box's 23 hours to do with his. Box pleased. And just as long as man wasn't fooling around in that magic 24th hour, that 1 hour when nothing in the world is safe from a lion who's got to eat, then, well, he was all right. But he threw himself in Box's business them other 23 hours, telling Box what he could do with his time and how he was supposed to be sleeping and so forth. He was counting Box's 24th hour like it was own. Well, Box didn't like that. He figured if the man was so big in his britches to count up his 24th hour, he might want to tell him how to count his 23 hours and tell him what to do in his 22nd hour and the 21st and so forth. So Box cleaned him up, beat him with his own stick, and sent him to the big nap because he knew it wouldn't be long before the man told him what to do with his 1 eating hour and every other single hour. I asked Box later, what did man sound like? For I had never spoken to man. You can't handle it, he said. What do he taste like, I asked, for I had never tasted man neither. He said, tastes like chicken. So that's the story called of Mr. P and the Wind. I'll just quickly summarize the other stories for you without reading them, unless you want to hear some more reading. I'm not. Some audiences want reading, some don't. You know. The Underground Railroad boxcar set is about a toy collector. And it's about a guy who collects antique toys. He's a Jewish guy from New York, and he's the most famous and most well-known, most well-regarded toy collector ever. Like anyone who has toys, who wants to sell their toys, Sotheby's, Christie's, they're all scared of this guy. Leo Bancroft is the best at what he does. He's made a pretty good living selling toys, and then he discovers that there is a toy he finds by accident, like the Mona Lisa of toys. And it's called the Underground Railroad boxcar set. It's a boxcar set that's related to General Lee. And it's a story of underground slavery and all this, but it's the most valuable toy train in the world. And he finds out that it still exists, and the guy who owns it is a preacher from a little storefront church in Queens. And so Leo Banshcoff, this great toy collector who walks into the guy's house, he's got $90,000 in a brief cash, ready to drop it on this poor preacher and his Amazon wife and his kid. They live right near Kennedy Airport. Planes are flying, like planes are turning in his yard. And he offers this guy oodles of money for this toy, and the guy blows his mind and says, I don't want any money, take it. And what? Just take it, take the toy. First, he has to find the guy because he can't find him. He's got prayer meeting here. He's doing the willing workers here on Thursday, preaching here. He's in Newark he's spreading the Lord's word. Spreading the Lord. Jesus said. So he finally convinces the guy to sell the toy. And after he convinces him to sell the toy, now Leo can retire forever. But he can't take it. He just, why is this? What is this about? Because the guy says, I'll let you sell it, but you can't tell my wife or my son. And he agrees. And then, just by accident, he finds out why. And so you have to read the story to figure that out. The Five-Carat Soul Bottom Bone Band is the story of a band of boys in a small town in Pennsylvania called Uniontown. Uniontown is a little town in Pennsylvania, for those of you who don't know Pennsylvania. It's in western Pennsylvania, close to Morgantown and Pittsburgh. And my brother-in-law, who is a gastroenterologist, it took me a long time to know how to say that, but that's when you go get your enema and all that, whatever that is. He's the guy. And he's very successful. He went to Howard. He comes from a little, he always say, I came from this little country town, and, it's 2 blocks long. Me and Vivian Stringer, the basketball coach. And so he used to talk about it all the time, and how they'd go to Uniontown, and how blacks and whites lived in this town all together. Is that a 10-minute sign? Oh, it's just well, anyway. So I decided to create a story in this town because I like working class people, whatever that amorphous term means. And so this is about the kids in that Five-Carat Soul Bottom Bone Band. The first one is about a kid named Buck Boy who got shot, who was shot and killed robbing a Korean grocery store. The second one is Ray Ray's Picture Box, which is about a little boy who is mentally, mentally challenged, who the kids convince him to get a box of his father's pornographic pictures, and they start selling it around the neighborhood, and they really get in a lot of trouble because of it. The next one is about Blub, a kid named Blub who gets himself tied up into accidentally gets tied up in a horrible murder. And Goat is about a little boy who was the fastest kid in this fictitious neighborhood called The Bottom in this town of Edinburgh. And so that's just the Five-Carat Soul Bottom Bone Band stories. And then the Moanin Bench is about 5 people who are at the gates of hell, and they're all from all different walks of life. And the last of them is a boxer. And they're dealing with the devil, and the devil is just ruthless, and he's just cracking jokes on them, and he makes fun of them. He says, you got to be, your teeth are bad, and your wife cheated on you, sucker, and what, And he has to decide whether they go to hell or not. And when he gets to the 5th guy, and he yanks them right out of life. He just yanks them wherever they are. He pulls them out, like a little girl got hit by a truck. So they're just yanked out of where they are, and they're on the Moanin Bench. In the Baptist church, for those of you who go to Baptist church, nowadays they pull out a chair, but in the old days they would bring a Moanin Bench. And when you accepted Jesus Christ, you sat, when someone would, after the minister delivers a sermon, then they pass around the tray. And that's when those of us who played in church, you better play something pretty. And when the music was playing, they'd say, does anybody want to come? Is there one? And whoever came up would sit on the Moanin Bench, and then the elders and the deacons and the deaconesses and the willing workers would pray over them. And so this is called the Moanin Bench, and these people are sitting on this bench when the devil's deciding whether or not they should go through the door or up to, with the other guy who's in personnel who thinks he knows what he's doing. So when he gets to the last guy, he has yanked this boxer up who had gotten knocked down and knocked unconscious, and so the boxer stands up and says, what? And then they have this back and forth, and so the boxer tricks the devil into boxing for their lives. So this is all about this boxer who tricks the devil into boxing for his life, and the lives of the other 4 people. The Christmas dance is based on a true story of a judge in New York that I used to know, and a Puerto Rican man that was his friend. They were veterans of World War II in the 92nd Division. The man's name was Florentino Lopez. He was a Puerto Rican, and the judge's name was Florentino Lopez. If those of you who saw Miracle at St. Anna will remember, the 3 of you who saw it, that the protagonist, the one who survives at the end, is a black Puerto Rican from New York. And this is closer to what really happened to Florentino Lopez. Florentino Lopez and Skiz Watson were involved in this fight in the town of Somocolonia, Italy, in which an American, a group of black soldiers were surrounded. During the Battle of the Bulge, that wasn't the only place where the Germans attacked the Americans. They had a gigantic push in Italy as well. And of course, no one knows about that because it's, black history. Nothing in this world happens unless white folks says it does. But this battle in the town of Somocolonia was something that the Italians never forgot. And there was a soldier who was involved in that battle who he acted extremely heroically. And he later on got the Medal of Honor from President Bill Clinton. But the ones around him did not. And so this is based on that. And basically what the story is why these guys go to this Christmas dance. Every year, these 2 guys, this judge who's a lame and this old Puerto Rican, who have nothing in common, every year they go to this Christmas dance. And this is revealed to a doctoral student from Columbia University who's trying to figure out what this dance is all about. And the other 2 stories are the Fishman Angel is about a slave who meets an angel who tells her that one day, he tells this woman, one day you will be free, free and free indeed. The language he used, I can't remember. And that gets communicated vis-a-vis the story to Abraham Lincoln. And he ends up dropping those terms dropping the exact phrase into the, was it the Gettysburg Address? I can't remember. What's the Emancipation Proclamation. Somebody here went to college. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And then the other one is one of my favorites. It's called Little Ape, I think. It's about a little boy, a little mixed race boy, who believes that Abe Lincoln is his father, and it's called Father Abe. And he's discovered by some black soldiers from the Union Army who are in Richmond right after Richmond fell. And it's just one of my favorites because they don't know what to do with this kid. He escaped, he runs away, and they find him, and they don't know what to do with him. And they don't know what to do because they're supposed to be free. And this kid starts asking questions about freedom. And it's very, very, very interesting. And it's very pertinent to some of the language that's used now today. I don't really write books. I mean, they put me in the race and politics category, but really I belong in the human category. I mean, race and politics will always be there. They're part of our lives, and they're part of what we have to negotiate. But the fact of the matter is, all my books deal with the commonality of the human experience. I've had many. I've done a lot, unfortunately. But I remember when I did one of these events, and I don't do this that much. I don't go out and talk anymore. I just finished a novel, so. I did, I'm like into like the 4th draft or something, but I just don't like to talk about this anymore. I think you should do it. You do. You don't talk. You do. And for me, what I do is I run a little program in my church. I have 25 kids that we train, to play piano and drums and bass. We train them like they train us. I'm training them to get into the Open Conservatory. I mean, they won't. Maybe one might, but it doesn't matter if they get into City College in New York. Because the discipline of music teaches you everything. Teaches you everything you want to know about being a writer. Because writing is the act of continually failing at something. There's always going to be someone who writes better, who's faster, who's clearer, whose language is... There's always somebody who's going to be smarter, slimmer, blonder, heavier, blacker, or whiter than you, but you can't be you more than you. No one can be you more than you. And so, all this talk about this... I remember when I did an event one time with Kurt Vonnegut, and this lady raised her hand. She said, Mr. Vonnegut, you writers, you've got the war, you've got to speak. And Kurt said, he said, Miss, we don't have the power you think we have. It begins with you, not with us. And I always remembered that because I feel that our job as writers is to illuminate and try to make people see that we are all the same. But if they don't want to see it, it doesn't mean we stop doing it should make us do it more. It's not that we live at a time now when we all have the same wall to push against. I mean, it used to be just black people had the wall because black New Yorkers knew who number 45 was. We were very familiar with him. And now everyone knows. Okay, it doesn't matter what you knew or what you did not know. It just matters what you do now in your own little world. When I was writing The Color of Water, after I finished writing it, during our time I was writing, I was in Little Jimmy Scott's band. Jimmy Scott is a singer. He's famous because he sounds like a girl. He sounds like Nancy Wilson. He never had his thyroid never developed, so he sounds like a girl. Well, he sounded like a girl when he was alive. And when we were playing in Philly one time, I was in Jimmy's band, and so we were playing, and my brother Richie came, and my brother Richie was like the jazz man of the family, Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, all. So after the set was over, I went to Richie. I said, Richie, what do you think, man? How do you think? What do you think of the band? Richie said, you guys sound all right. He said, and that girl singing, she was. And I said, no, man, Jimmy's not a girl. He said, no, man, that is a girl. She's little. She got short hair. She's an Indian. It's a Pocahontas. That's a girl. So I said no. He said, well, have you ever seen him go to the bathroom? And it never occurred to me. I said, well, no. But we went to Boston, and that night we left to go to Boston, and we were in a van, those vans where there's like sit 8 people. And Jimmy was in the front seat. He said, pull over, baby, I got to go to the bathroom, baby. So the driver pulled over, and we went to one of those rest stops. Those rest stops where they hand you the key on a wooden block like this? And you don't even want to touch the wooden block. They hand it to you. So I said, I got to go to the bathroom too, Jimmy. So I went around to the side, and he went into the bathroom, and he closed the door on me, slammed it in my face. So I said, oh, maybe there's something to that. So then we were coming back from Boston, and we were on the turnpike somewhere, and we went to one of those bathrooms where it was open. And then I just out of curiosity, and I looked, and I realized while his thyroid hadn't developed, everything else was very much in place. And I don't really know how I got into telling you that story, but... I know. I was in Jimmy Scott's band, and we were flying to Montreal to open for Rosemary Clooney, who was a jazz singer, who was very talented. She sang with Duke and all these, great singer. So we... And what happened was we were late because the plane couldn't land. And while we were flying, I wasn't telling anybody in the band I was writing a book about my Jewish mother. I didn't say anything because it's the job. You don't bring you're playing in a group, you're getting paid. You don't bring your business to your job. So but I was learning all this history, especially about anti-Semitism in the South. It was just disturbing, And there was a little Hasidic Jewish boy sitting across the aisle from me. And when the plane was circling, they decided to feed us, and they tried to give him some. I said, well, don't give him any. He's not going to eat. Just give him some water. And so they gave him a glass of water because, he had the little pious little braids and the yarmulke. So they gave him the water, and the kid took the water, and I was grinning at the kid. He did one of these. Look. No, he was smart. His mother told him, don't talk to strangers, which is what my mother told. So anyway, we got to. One of the guys in the band made a crack about the kid, while we were flying. And we got into an argument, me and him. It was bad. When you're traveling with somebody, you're sick of them anyway. And so the bass player, who was the straw boss of the band, was sitting right next to me. He's the guy who hires everybody in the band. His name is Hill Green. And Hill didn't say a word. He didn't say a word. He just looked grim. And so we got to the event. We were supposed to change into tuxes, but we were so late that we just did the sound check in our street clothes. And people were coming in, and we were doing a sound check. And Hill was back there leaning. He was playing his bass. He was behind me. I was in front. I was playing tenor in the front. And Hill leaned over to me and he said, "You know what, James?" He said, "That joke that wasn't funny to me neither." And he went back and he kept kept warming up. And I say that to tell you that it's easy to talk. But when you live it, you inch the world forward just that much more. And that's really why we read books. We read books to edge the evil out of our lives just a little bit, every day, just a little at a time. I'm not asking you to sacrifice your mortgage, but if you send $10 to somebody who's running for Congress who you believe is that's a good thing. And you don't have to beat someone over the head because you don't agree with them politically. That's not the way. You just move to the right way. Whatever way is right. You know, hating on people and one-upping and putting comedy shows and making fun of people, it doesn't help. It doesn't help. People watch what you do. The kids in my housing project where I work, in the same church that my mother started 65 years ago, they don't know anything about who the president is. They don't care. But they deal with despair and hatred and disaster with so much grace and so much kindness, and their parents too, that it just says to me, you just have to keep living good. You have to live better. And so that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. Now, about my mother died in 2010, January 9th. She died at home in bed. My brother was in Puerto Rico on his honeymoon, and my mother waited for him to get home, and then she died. I mean, at one point she said, "Am I dying?" And it was the most difficult thing in the world to say yes. So what I did was I said, well, Jesus is waiting. He's coming. He's waiting for you on the other side. Jesus. She was the same religious fervor that she had as a Jewish person. She just transferred it to Christianity. So she was very religious, and she just hailed God in whatever form he happened to be. I mean, you might get up there, you might find Rudy Giuliani's running the show. You never know. But whatever she saw, she came to it peacefully. And it was an honor to be raised by someone who was so good and so kind and so generous. And yes, of course, I'm a little more partial to Jewish people than I might be to, Irish Catholics. But not really. I mean, what difference does it make? Really, what difference does it make? So, in any case, that book came out, and the only people who read it in the early days really were young Jewish women aged 20 to 80, honestly. And you haven't lived until you've been to a coffee klatch in Teaneck, New Jersey or something. They're saying, let's check his teeth. Wait a minute, look. Oh, see that? Okay, it's all right. It's okay, And then, gradually, mothers came around to it, and last but not least, here come the black readers. They finally, black women, thank God that black women read books. Most of my black men friends have not read many of my books. And that's not because they're bad, it's just because they like the Dallas Cowboys, who cares? Really. So, and as a result of that book being successful, I've been kind of like the poster boy for the mixed race. I mean, but see, I've never really accepted that role, because I don't really care. We're all mixed. What difference does it make? They called Barack Obama the first black president. No, he was just a great president. I don't care. Words, He's such a good man. He was so smart. He tried so hard. He was willing to forgive it. He never struck back. He showed such class and dignity. If your daughter brought home a son like that, you say, if you don't marry, I'm going to kill you. So I mean, it's good that people need to do that, but I think you politicize race and gender, and when you politicize race and gender and religion, you make a mistake. You have to humanize it however you can. And if people don't accept it, so what? It doesn't matter. And then the good Lord Bird really resulted in, I wanted to write a book about Abraham Lincoln. But when I read Carl Sandburg's books on him, I was like, forget it, man. Because I think I was just... So I ended up writing Song Yet Sung, which was about the Underground Railroad. And then I came to the John Brown story while doing that. And I went to Harper's Ferry. I spent a lot of time at Harper's Ferry, and I was fascinated with John Brown. But I wanted to do it in a way that was really funny. And so that's why Good Lord Bird is a funny book. I must have read about 25 books when I wrote The Good Lord Bird. And my next book, which is not out yet, but next year it's out, it's going to be about it's funny as well. It's about an old man, an old, creaky old man in the projects who shoots like the most ruthless drug dealer in the project. And it's all about the projects and the people who live there, and it humanizes a part of that world that most of us only see from behind the wheel of a locked car. And part of the reason why I wrote that is that most of us, when we drive past a housing project, we see The Wire. We see David Simon's version of it. And David Simon is talented. I work with him. He's a very talented person. And I have enormous respect for him. But there's another side of poverty and hardship and urban life that most people don't see. The people who work, the people who have second cousins who pull out their teeth at Christmas and go, there's a whole world of humanity that most people don't see. And it's been my privilege to see this in the last 6 years as I've been running this program in Red Hook. To see people that I knew grow up, some of them die, and the dignity and the humor and the joy of it. And it's just been it's been wonderful. Anyway, I got the 15-minute cue, which means it's time for questions. So you came a long way to come, and if you want to ask a question, just go right ahead. Just step to the mic and.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So just wanted to share with you that I had Five-Carat Soul from the library in an audiobook, but I didn't get to it. I had to return it, so I haven't read it yet. But I read the James Brown book in audio. Before that, I read the Good Lord Bird in audio. And I just want to know what you think of the fact that my full exposure to your work has been through audiobooks. Are you I don't know if I'm alone in that. I just wonder if you're involved with it, because there's got to be other people like me. We come to your books. It's kind of a mediated format. It's not, you didn't read, I don't think, any of the audiobooks.
No, I didn't. I didn't read any of them. I don't mind it. I listen to audiobooks myself. I'm reading, right now I'm listening to Lionel Shriver's book, Property. And I'm enjoying it. So I don't mind. I mean, I don't want to read my books on time. I just feel like, I'm just not qualified. I just can't do it. Once I finish a book, I never have to. I had to reread this as I was coming here to figure out what happened. I mean, I swear to God, I've given readings, fiction readings. Once I gave a reading one time, I told the lady, and the lady stood and she said, "Why did you let her die?" I was like, "She did not die." And the lady went like this. "Right here, she died." And I was like, "Oh, okay." But you have to remember, when you're writing fiction, fiction, you don't really know, you don't know what's going to happen. You just, it's in the air. It's in the air, and you ride it, and then it settles where it settles, and then you get out. You leave. You close the door, you thank the people, you tip the waiters and waitresses, and you get out. So I just couldn't remember. And that's really, so, but in terms of the actual audio experience, I don't mind it. I mean, I would like one day to do a book where I would provide the music and the sung lyric and you sing it through. I've tried it, in the case of one piece that exists. I haven't published it yet because no publisher's interested. They just believe in music or book. They don't believe that you can combine them. I know you can. I mean, it's called opera, but I don't really call it that. I call it bopera. It's a way of combining good music with good story, because in any show that you see, if the book doesn't work, it doesn't matter how good the music is. There are so many good music songs come from Broadway shows that are gone. The books carry the show. I mean, I used to do musical theater. I know Stephen Schwartz, all those guys, when I was young and had hair, and I wasn't afraid to be broke, it was great. But anyway, did I answer your question?
Yeah, so you have no involvement. Like, you haven't listened to one of them and gone, "Oh, this guy screwed up the way he read my book," or "I wish I had done it," or anything like that.
Well, I listened to this one, Five-Carat Soul, yeah. And they had different people reading. I like the guy who read the Christmas dance, the Dominic something or other. He was my favorite. I can't remember his name. All of these actors are very talented, but it doesn't matter to me. I'm not that picky about as long as the person is clear and has, like I heard this actor reading The Old Man and the Sea, Donald Sutherland. And I was fascinated because he talks with the lisps. So everything, and then I just started focusing on, so I couldn't listen to it because it just started messing my mind up. I was like, so that's what I couldn't listen because I know his work. He's great. He's a great actor, But then I just kept thinking about that. So, if Donald Sutherland has any friends in the audience, just tell him. Honest to Jesus, he's a great actor. It's not him. I did listen to a Moby Dick on tape, and that was wonderful, man. The last 3 chapters of Moby Dick are the most exciting chapters of fiction writing that I personally can think of. You have a question, man?
I do. The Good Lord Bird, which was magnificent. I truly enjoyed it. But the character, the little boy who's in the book, how did you develop him and where did you get your idea for him? Because he was captivating.
Well, actually what I wanted to do was I wanted him to be a girl, but I didn't feel confident enough to write about a girl, to write from a girl's perspective. And so I said, well, how can I do this? So I just decided to make him a boy, and I said, this would be good. But then when I decided to make him a boy, he just started to really create himself. Now, you should know that when I read earlier from the Mr. P and the Wind about the lion, that's when the language of the Good Lord Bird began. Because you'll notice that in the language of Mr. P and the Wind, I am a lion, I live in a zoo, but I was once a free lion and never forgot it. Look to the similarity of the Good Lord Bird. I can't remember how it begins, but I was once a slave and now something. But also the language of the South was really crucial to making that character work, and that took a long time to develop. That started with that short story. And for those of you who are young writers, I mean not young in age, but young in experience, oftentimes your failures teach you things that can help you later on, if you're wise enough to hang on to them and not throw them in the garbage. So that boy just became, and then I just read lots of slave narratives. And then after a while, he came to life, Does that answer your question?
Well, it does, yeah. He's just, you just need to know, he's unforgettable. You gave life to an unforgettable character, in my mind anyway.
Well, I mean, the innocence of children is a really effective literary tool if it's not overused. And part of the reason why that character works for you, thank you, is because he's an old man talking about the innocence of his childhood. So he could also he could talk like an old, dirty old man, but still recall when he wasn't. If that not dirty old man, but just so not a dirty old man, Yes, sir?
Hi. Just wanted to tell you, you are a treasure. And I'm Jewish, and I love jazz, and I'm a teacher. And when I was listening to the story about the lion, I could see that story being told to kids, and them really learning something from it. The problem now is the language and the limitations that are put on you when you're working with kids. You can't. They can use the language, but you can't. And the basic question is, how do you compare your jazz love to your writing? Where does that fall in?
Well, the short answer to your question is I wrote this story for kids, but nobody wanted it back then. Shall I name them? I shall not. But, what I use music for is I use music to teach me structure, because music requires that you at least jazz music requires that you lay out certain light points that you have to hit as a soloist and as an instrumentalist. And then I'm free within, moving from one point to the next. And that helps me create structure. And once I know the structure in my mind, then I can go to it as a writer. And also story structure comes, an enormous amount of it comes out of character. I write character bios. I do an enormous work on my characters before I write, before I do anything. Now with the lion story, I didn't, because that was just pure emotion. It was based on just disgust with seeing these beautiful creatures locked in these cages. And that was just, that was just sometimes, every once in a while, not a lot, but every once in a while, the thing happens. But normally, and for kids, by the way, with my kids, the kids who come to my program, I don't allow cell phones. And if I see a cell phone, I take it and I put it in my pocket. I mean, what we really have to do with kids, and I have enormous, first of all, we don't pay teachers enough. Teachers and cops and firemen, they just don't, it's just ridiculous. I sense a school teacher or two here. I do it. I feel it. No, but we don't pay them enough. And part of the reason their jobs are so difficult is because kids can't focus. And they can't focus because they're looking at that cell phone all day. You've got to, we have to monitor the behavior. Anyway, we have time for one more. Did I answer your question? All right, thank you. One more question, and then we only have 2 minutes, and then the next group comes in. Go ahead, yeah. Is there some? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll answer both very quickly if you just.
Thank you. I've been in a book club for 23 years, and one of our first books we ever read was, Color of Water. And whenever I get a chance, I pick one of your books. And next month we're doing Five-Carat Soul. So my question is, what should I tell my gang? What you personally would like to share with us about writing the book and what you haven't shared with other people?
Now, that's a book club I want to go to.
Yeah. We're having lunch at the Stratford Hall on October 13th.
No, that would not be that. We've got to build that wall. That's all there is to it. We got to build that wall and keep them out. All right. Well, I had a hard time figuring out the order of the stories, and I had a really hard time putting together the Christmas dance because that story is really, really disjointed. It's really structured in a way that took an enormous amount of work. You can tell them that, and it's still true.
Okay.
All right. Last one.
Okay, so what's your experience been creating in different art forms? So I've been trained as an opera singer, and that's taken a lot of just a lot of effort and focus on that field. But I want to do so much more artistically.
Okay, that's a great question. I know exactly what you're talking about. The amount of discipline required to hone that great instrument that you have. You have to start to just translate, just push that into something else that gives you some creative oomph. Most musicians like yourself don't realize how well they can write. Musicians, opera singers, classical players, jazz players as well, they're so faithful to what the Creator has done that a lot of, in training to recreate what has been done so magnificently, they shut off the valve to their own creativity. And there was a very interesting article about Ethan Hawke today in the Times. And I know Ethan. Me and Ethan would just kick it. We're grooving and grooving. No, he's making The Good Lord Bird into a TV series. And it's funny, he came to the church, and when he came to the church, because I said, I'm not going nowhere. I'm at the church down the street from you. Come on over. He came to the church, and he walked in the door, and one of the ladies said, "Oh, are you here to fix the air conditioner?" But the reason why I bring that up is that, and he was cool about it. He was good. But the reason I bring that up is that you spend years training this instrument of yours to do this, this wonderful thing without knowing that while you are singing Verdi or whatever it is you're singing, that you're tightening the valve to your own creativity, so that a mistake in that is actually the beginning of a melody here. And so you have to kind of figure out where in your genre, where your strengths are. Are they in the storytelling side or in the music side? Probably a bit of both. So if I were you, I would just if not take a writing class, create a writing situation for yourself that forces you to study the works of some of these great librettists, so that you would say, why does this work? And then just read some like Bird by Bird by Alice Munro, and Richard Key's book on screenwriting, stuff that just gives you technical things to think about. The thing is that you don't need talent. You just need skill. You have the talent. So you have to find the skill. And if you can sing opera, if you can sing classical music, you certainly can write a book. And on that note, thank you very much. Thanks for coming out.